Hi, everyone. Good Tuesday afternoon, and welcome to GoLocal Live. I'm GoLocal News editor Kate Nagel. Thanks for tuning in for the 4 o'clock news and politics show. We've got a good one for you, and as we do almost every week, tune in with Jennifer Lawless down at the University of Virginia, who's on the road during the summer session here. And we're going to catch up with some national and local politics. Jennifer, thank you for joining us.
Happy to be here.
I want to kick off, let's start supranational, and of course, always talking about the administration of President Donald Trump. Let's start off by talking about the interview. Is there any other way to describe it with George Stephanopoulos and what's maybe being called Coughgate? Now, of course, this is when Chief of Staff Mick Mulvaney was coughing during a question about Trump and his tax returns. And the president did not look too kindly upon this. How long does this have legs for?
I think it has legs for a long time for a couple of reasons. The first is that it speaks to character and the fact that Donald Trump was unwilling to let his chief of staff cough. And he was unwilling to just sort of let that go as a normal human function suggests that he's so self-involved and so invested in making sure that he always appears the way he wants to appear, that he's completely lost touch with normal human behavior and activity. The second reason I think it really has legs is because it highlights that Donald Trump thinks he's on reality television and that he can just redo what he doesn't like. And so when Mick Mulvaney began coughing, he was in the middle of his sentence, he finished the sentence, and then he looked at George Stephanopoulos and said, "Let's do that again. I don't like it when I'm interrupted." The cameras were still rolling and the footage still caught that. And so, this is not an episode of The Apprentice where when he doesn't like, I think that when the American people see that and when voters see that, I think they'll have a little bit more insight into the way that Donald Trump's mind actually works. And I don't think it works well for Donald Trump.
Do you think people continue to talk about this moving forward, or is it just in the backs of people's minds as another episode, if you will, of the Trump administration?
Well, I think this is one of those examples where if Donald Trump does anything else that's consistent with reality TV or the way that he behaved on The Apprentice, this is the kind of story that will come back out and will be reminded of again and again. So I can bet that this footage will be seen time and time again between now and November 2020.
Speaking of 2020, with President Donald Trump looking to officially launch his re-election effort in Florida, comments made this week by the president that he's looking to take part in mass deportations of illegal immigrants in the near future. And now let's talk about a little bit about the timing of this and about the implications of what he said.
Well, the timing is certainly politically motivated. He knows that his core supporters are very, very hardline immigration people. He knows that they would completely get on board if he were actually able to round up and deport families of illegal immigrants. And he knows that he's going to be speaking to those people over the course of the next week as he kicks off his campaign. And so the political motivation is pretty clear. So is launching the campaign in Florida, although today the Orlando Sentinel said that they were endorsing anybody but Donald Trump, even though they don't know who the alternative is. So hospitable to him as he expected. In terms of the actual policy, it's awful, and it's part of the reason that several Republicans, including Kirstjen Nielsen, resigned from or were asked to leave the Trump administration. I mean, this is an administration now, and this is a president who has said that over the course of the next week, they plan to deport families that are together that have been here and are well aware of the fact that these deportations could take place while kids are at camp or at school, and they're going to come home to no parents. And the substance of that decision, the visuals associated with that, and the lack of compassion just does not seem to bother this administration.
And as you mentioned, again, the ABT movement, the Anyone But Trump movement, of course, the crowded Democratic 2020 field, with comments made recently by Pete Buttigieg that if elected, he would not be the first gay president of the United States. Talk with us a little bit about that comment made and a little bit about what you've seen for reaction.
I mean, I'm not going to speculate as to who might have been speaking about. I do think that this highlights that we've changed as a society in terms of what we are okay with when we're thinking about what the head is and who can occupy that position. I think that what he's highlighting is that the actual composition in the public probably hasn't changed. There were gay people a long time ago. There were gay people now, and there are gay people in the future. You can be more upfront about it and out front about it. I do think, though, that the entire conversation speaks more broadly to the kind of country that he thinks we should be and the kind of acceptance that the Democratic Party in general is pushing for and the level of inclusivity that they're supporting. And I think that that's one of the biggest factors that differentiates the Democrats, regardless of who the nominee will be, with Donald Trump and what the Republican field looks like.
And how often do you think that, Pete Buttigieg has to continually address the gay factor? Again, normalizing it here, bringing it up and saying that he thinks that, he would not be the first gay president. Does it just continue to bubble to the surface, both by him and by others? And it seems that he's taking on the narrative on his own.
He's taking on the narrative on his own because it's better to shape the narrative if you are the one introducing the topic rather than responding to it. So that doesn't surprise me. It's consistent with how Barack Obama addressed race, how Hillary Clinton addressed gender, and didn't leave it to their opponents to sort of frame the debate or shape the narrative. In the Democratic primary, I don't think it's going to be a very big deal. But moving into the general election, should Buttigieg get the nomination, and I don't see any path by which that will happen, but should he get the nomination, then I think you wind up having more of a debate over issues like, the Defense of Marriage Act and the fact that the Supreme Court has basically said that it's okay, for gay people to get married. And other states have to recognize that. I think those kinds of debates about those kinds of social policy issues become a little bit different should he be the nominee. But I mean, generally speaking, I don't think it's going to be a big deal. The American people have moved and evolved on this issue far faster than they have race or gender or anything else. And I think that is a good thing, not only for Democratic politics, but for the nation as a whole.
So let's talk about that crowded 2020 field. Recent polls still have former Vice President Joe Biden out in front. Looks like Elizabeth Warren could be also making some strides as well. Now, there have been some columns, some commentary written that Joe Biden appears to be running like he's running in a primary of one. Let's dissect that one a little bit. Do you agree with that statement that he's just eyeing the president, and is that the correct strategy for Joe Biden as the front runner right now to take?
Well, it seems to be the correct strategy as of right now because his poll numbers aren't going anywhere. He remains the sure front runner, and the support that Elizabeth Warren seems to be picking up is at the expense of Bernie Sanders. So until the first debate next week, and until we start seeing how the candidates are going to be attacking or critiquing one another, if I were Joe Biden, I would continue doing exactly what he's doing. Run against Donald Trump. Don't really mention your opponents by name in the primary, and make this all about you. Elevate the game. The other candidates, of course, have every incentive to try and knock him down because that's the only way that they can get up. And my sense is that will start, and we'll start seeing the messages and the strategies that they employ next week.
Again, so we always like to end that interview on what we're going to look at next week. Obviously, all eyes on that debate with the Democratic contenders. Are those the big points that you're looking at? Again, how Vice President Biden comports himself with his potential crowded field and how they in turn view him as the front runner. What else are we keeping an eye on?
A couple other things that I would note are, first, Elizabeth Warren lucked out. She and Beto O'Rourke are in one debate, whereas Harris, Sanders, and Biden are in the other. And so this allows Elizabeth Warren to really craft a path for herself forward. And it'll be interesting to see whether she just differentiates herself from the candidates who are not on the stage with her, or if she just takes this as an opportunity to introduce herself to the American people. The other thing that I would note is I just read that Donald Trump claims that he will live tweet the Democratic debates next week. And I think that will be very, very telling as well, because the kinds of attacks and the kinds of reactions moving forward about how the Democratic candidates themselves want to respond to the president. So it could also be somewhat amusing. We'll see.
So will you be watching the debate and your Twitter feed simultaneously, or will you wait to maybe the aftermath to see how the president responded to the candidates?
So I will wait. I can only stomach so much, and I'm more interested in what the Democratic candidates have to say than Donald Trump's take on them, especially after the Stephanopoulos interview, where it became clear that he's now willing to deem things not only fake news, but fake polls and fake everything else. So
do you think the president has the capacity? I mean, obviously his Republican base will be following what he says. Can he co-opt it, if you will? Can he sort of interrupt the process and basically interject himself into it by his tweeting during the debate?
Well, I think he can do that in a couple of ways. The first is if he says anything that seems to resonate, even though the other Democratic candidates would probably not adopt Trump's specific language, the kinds of attacks that he puts out there become fodder for them to possibly adopt themselves. The second thing is he is president of the United States and he is going to be the Republican nominee. So anything he says is by definition newsworthy. So when a sitting president decides to tweet about a Democratic debate, journalists, for better or worse, have no choice but to cover to some extent what it is that the president is saying. So it will make it into the news, and those criticisms will become part of the Monday morning quarterbacking the day after.
Well, we're going to keep a close eye on that next week. And as always, we appreciate you taking the time to Skype into us here on GoLocal Live. Jennifer Lawless at UVA, thank you very much. Okay, we're going to let Professor Lawless go. We're going to get a lot more local here. Of course, the big fight right now, the proposed Providence City Council leadership's proposed tax structure change here in Providence. We have a supporter here in studio with us. We'll be right back here on GoLocal Live.